Black History Month is here. Certainly, you're still celebrating a very historic win. And what better way to sort of put this in context to celebrate this month as well?
Thank you so much. Yeah, Black history is American history. And you cannot tell the American story in full without reference to people of African descent. And I'm grateful just to be a part of that story. But it's a continuing story that embraces in the state of Georgia the likes of Andrew Young, who was the first Black congressman from the South since Reconstruction when he was elected in 1970. And here I am in 2021, Georgia's first Black United States Senator. But even as we tell that story, it's never been an exclusive story. It is a story about the building of the kind of multiracial coalition that is necessary to create what the founders called a more perfect union. And we need all of our voices and the vision and perspective that comes from various backgrounds to make real the promises of our democracy. And I think that's what this month is really about. It reminds us of the ways in which we're all tied together.
And I think this is kind of along that same line, you know, as we've seen the increase in social justice, especially these past few years, the movement, more white people have gotten involved in that. And I think there's been a bigger conversation about, you know, what can white people be doing at this time to bring that social justice change? So what is your message to them?
Well, we absolutely did see in the wake of the tragic flashpoints of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, all over the last few months. In the midst of that tragic strain of human beings turned into hashtags, we saw the emergence of a multiracial coalition of conscience marching out into American streets, masked up to protect themselves from one virus, COVID-19, in order to do battle against another virus, COVID-19. The whole story of racism that began when enslaved people first started to arrive on these shores. That work is ongoing. And I think what we need is people in their own spheres of influence to stand up for bigotry, stand up against bigotry, no matter where it rears its ugly head, whether it's in the church or at work, or if your workplace happens to be the United States Capitol, you ought to call bigotry for what it is. It shouldn't be tolerated. You can't play with bigotry. I think we're seeing that being played out in this moment. It has a way of growing. It is a virus that mutates. And if we're not careful, it infects you. And if it doesn't infect you, it certainly affects you.
So at this time when we have a transition to power, I think, you know, it's kind of commonplace for lawmakers to sort of call for unity. That, you know, if you're putting things in context, may be harder this time around, just with what the country has gone through in this pandemic and just the sort of vitriol that is, you know, seems to be at, you know, higher levels than it was in previous points in our history, at least our modern history. So how do you accomplish that? You know, you're new to the scene up there. There's a lot of people that are entrenched in the way they've done things. So if unity is the goal, what's your role in that?
Well, you know, I think this is a teachable moment. We have been engaged in a struggle against this age-old virus of bigotry. But I think this moment in which we are dealing with an airborne, deadly disease is itself a lesson. You know, viruses don't respect racial boundaries. They don't know race. They don't know ethnicity. They don't even know national boundaries. We're dealing with a global epidemic that reminds us that we're as close to one another in our humanity as a cough. My neighbor coughs, she may be sick, but I am potentially imperiled because I'm dealing with an airborne deadly disease. I think that moral lesson has to be transferred to the work of public policy. It is the reason why I stand up for a livable wage for working families, because that doesn't just impact them. When working families are struggling, the whole American economy is struggling, which is why we've got to get direct aid to families. We got to get that aid right away. and we've got to make sure that people have access to the American promise. And so I'm going to raise my voice every single day that I'm here. I'm going to try to fight on the side of our better angels and continually remind us of the ways in which we're tied together in a single garment of destiny.
I just wanted we interviewed several of your friends and former neighbors and folks that have known you from your time in Savannah. And, they said on your behalf, he will make us proud. He will do right by coastal Georgia. And obviously, when you talk about the economic piece, even outside of the pandemic, we have great disparities here. We have, people who have lived in generational crippling poverty. What can you say to those folks? What help can be on the way? What is your vision for how you fix that problem?
Well, in the immediate future, I'm going to be very focused on helping to push through President Biden's COVID stimulus package, because people have literally been suffering for months without any relief. So we've got to get that addressed. But in the longer term, future, I'm going to be focused on the kinds of things that give children like the child I was growing up in the housing projects in Savannah a chance. And so one of the things you will see me stand up and fight for over the next few days and weeks is the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. We literally have an opportunity to lift American children out of poverty, to cut child poverty in half. And we can do that this year. And so the question is, if we have the ability to do it, why won't we do it? And I will be raising that question on moral terms, because I think it's the right thing to do, but also on practical terms. I know from experience that an investment in our children, I think, is worthwhile. They are our best resource, and they are the keepers of the American promise. And so I will be focused on children like me, who are growing up not just in public housing, but in rural disaffected communities all across the state. That is the path to the future.